Widespread opposition to a proposal by the British government to ban all prosecutions of Troubles-related killings and other crimes. This would mean there will be no future prosecutions of former British soldiers and police officers or Republican and Loyalist paramilitaries for crimes before the Good Friday Agreement, and an end to all legacy inquests and civil cases. Most of the over 3,000 killings during the Troubles remain unsolved. The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson told the House of Commons that the plan was to enable the province of Northern Ireland to draw a line under the Troubles, to enable the people of Northern Ireland to move forward. The Taoiseach said the proposals were wrong for many, many reasons and called on the UK government to honour the Stormont House Agreement. Our reporter Una Kelly has been speaking to some family members of people who were killed during the Troubles. It begins with Kathleen Gillespie, whose husband Patsy died in 1990 after he was strapped into a car and forced to drive an IRA car bomb into a British Army checkpoint.
I was flabbergasted. I can't believe that there's such a suggestion on the table, across the board amnesty. That's really what they're saying. And I think it's ridiculous, because where is the justice in that for the victims if the perpetrators are being told they're not going to get prosecuted ever? The men who murdered my husband are still out there walking the streets. They were never sentenced. They were never prosecuted. I would like to see the whole thing being investigated, them paying for their crime.
Kathleen, Boris Johnson says that this legislation will help people in Northern Ireland draw a line under the Troubles.
He means brush it all under the carpet. Is that's what he's saying? Draw a line, I don't know. I won't draw a line. There are too many people who will object to this decision. Too many people will be hurt because of it. Well, we just feel cheated. And that leaves us dangling. It just means that it makes us feel in some way that we're not worth bothering about. We're inferior in some way, that we won't worry if they don't try to look for justice. It just makes you feel that we've been let down.
What would your message be to the British government?
Think about how they would feel if it happened to them. Personally, each one personally. Think about how they would feel if they had gone through something like I went through.
My name is John Joseph Taggart. My father was murdered on the 9th of August 1971 in Ballymurphy Massacre. I also lost my brother, who was murdered by the IRA 2 years later. He was aged 15. Only be described as sheer anger that after all that we've been through, after the campaigning for 50 years, and find out that our loved ones were declared entirely innocent, and then you have the British government just coming out with a proposal to stop us in the tracks of any further of progressing our campaign for truth and justice. Absolutely the disgraceful act by the British government.
If this legislation goes ahead, some families will not be able to get an inquest such as your family did. What do you make of that?
My heart goes out to them, because I can feel for these families, because I know from personal experience of what you go through, what you have to do, the sacrifices you make throughout your journey for trying to get truth and justice.
My name is Julie Hambleton. I'm one of the campaigners for Justice for the 21, which is a group of families of those who were murdered in the Birmingham pub bombings in 1974. One of the victims that was murdered was my sister, Maxine Hambleton.
Julie, how did you feel when you heard the news about the proposed legislation?
Sick. Incandescent with rage. It is something that we never thought would be possible in a country that claims to have given the Western civilized world democracy. But it's all right for terrorists to kill as many people as they like, because the government will allow them to walk free. Who in their right mind would agree to such legislation? Not only being proposed, but being implemented.
The UK government says it hopes this legislation will help people move past the Troubles. What do you think of that?
It's a load of rubbish. They have no concept of what reconciliation and what any kind of peace to families like ours looks like, because they live in a Westminster bubble.
Julie Hambleton, John Taggart, and before that Kathleen Gillespie speaking with our reporter Una Kelly. Baroness Nuala O'Lone is a former police ombudsman in Northern Ireland, and she's with us now. Nuala O'Lone, good morning. Thanks for taking our call today.
Good morning.
Are you surprised by this proposal?
We had all heard that there were proposals for an amnesty. I had not anticipated that not only would there be as proposed amnesty in effect, but also a complete end to all legacy inquests and all civil actions in respect of damage and injury suffered during the Troubles for the relatives of those who died. It's a terrible, terrible betrayal of the victims and their families, and they have spoken, I think, very eloquently on your programme there. I've actually heard one person welcome it, and that's Lord Dannatt, who's former head of the British Army. Yes. I haven't heard anybody else welcome it. It's a denial of justice, and it's a denial of justice in all its forms. You know,
Boris Johnson, just on that point about the army, Boris Johnson was very clear in the House of Commons yesterday. He said, the sad fact remains that there are many members of the armed services who continue to face the threat of vexatious prosecutions well into their 70s, 80s and later, and we're finally bringing forward a solution to this problem to enable the province of Northern Ireland to draw a line under the Troubles. In your view, is the British government's focus purely on the British Army?
No, I think it's much wider than that. I think it's on the whole cost of answering the questions which people legitimately have as, you know, citizens here in Ireland and in the United Kingdom and indeed elsewhere. I think it's a very clear breach of our international legal obligations. But not just that. You know, under the Human Rights Act, they brought human rights home. That was what they said in 1998. And that gives people the right to a timely and effective investigation of cases, particularly where there's a suspicion of state agents being involved in a death. And under these proposals, they'd be deprived of all their legal rights. I find it astonishing. And if I can give you two examples. One, we've just heard about the Ballymurphy inquests.
Yes.
So we can think back to Bloody Sunday. We can think about Ballymurphy, where the story which was told was not the true story, and innocent people died. But then think too, I'm involved with something called the Canova investigation. That's the investigation of the state agent known as Steak Knife. It's also investigating the deaths of 3 police officers, the deaths of a lady called Jean Campbell Smith, who died very early in the Troubles. Now, that investigation has put to the Director of Public Prosecutions over 28 files, which, in respect of which there has been no direction, no decision. Now, those 28 files relate to 17 murders and 12 abductions, which have been investigated. Now, the files began to arrive with the Director of Public Prosecutions in 2019, and there still is no answer from the Director of Public Prosecutions. This paper by the government says that only 9 people have been prosecuted. But the reason is that they're not being prosecuted is that they have stopped prosecuting them.
Yes.
And they've stopped making decisions to prosecute, so that it's not a question that the evidence is not there. In some cases, I grant you very few, the evidence is there. But if you look at those cases alone, Operation Canova has given the Director of Public Prosecutions over 50,000 pages of evidence. 2,000 new evidential statements have been secured. There is information to be had out there, and it may or may not lead to a trial, but we need to ensure that our country is built on the rule of law, and that we don't deny the rule of law and deny people the rights that they have in law. It is profoundly important.
If the British government wants to introduce a statute of limitations, even against a lot of opposition, realistically, can they be stopped?
I think it's going to be profoundly difficult in Parliament. I think it's interesting that immediately there's a response from the victims of the Birmingham pub bombing, so it's not just Northern Ireland that this will apply to. I think that the Irish government's response is predictable. It's only a few weeks since the government came out of a joint meeting and said that they were going to implement the Stormont House Agreement. And the Stormont House Agreement provides for not only truth recovery, but also for investigation. The government have the power in the House of Commons to do this because of their majority. Whether it would pass through Parliament, though, whether all parliamentarians would be prepared to say Britain no longer stands by the rule of law insofar as Northern Ireland is concerned, I would hope that there'd be more integrity in Parliament.
Baroness Nuala Lone, former police ombudsman in Northern Ireland, thank you for speaking to us today.